Hello everybody. It's on? Yeah. Okay, so first of all, thank you Shirish and KRVIA for inviting us here. We're very excited to be talking to all of you. And okay, okay. So just to start with StudioPOD, we are a very young urban planning, and by young we mean we're only 3 years old, and we have a lot of beautiful and young faces that are part of our firm. And today what we're going to do is that we were thinking yesterday, okay, what are we going to talk about with all of you? And we thought that one thing that we would like to share with you is a glimpse of some of our projects, but also more important, our philosophies and the story. So basically this presentation is about our journey and our encounters in the past 3 years. So, okay, starting with us. So, yes, the StudioPOD story. Go next. So since everybody's talking about Pokemon, we thought it was we will a little twist, and we will special powered Pokemons. And so basically all of us are individual, and 3 years ago, Sarfraz, Mahesh and myself, along with Shraddha, Rahul, we came back to Mumbai after finishing our masters in urban planning, urban design, different fields. We came back to Mumbai and we said, okay, we will start a young urban design and planning firm. We will not do architecture, we will not do interiors. And over the journey, we also were lucky to meet some of our other Pokemons with special strengths, and they're here. We have Anuja, and Siddharth is not here. They've joined us. They've studied from London and Newcastle. They came. They were like, okay, we want to be a part of this. We said, okay, you want to come join the craziness? Be happy to. And of course, there were these young Mumbaikars and Delhiites who joined us and said, okay, we want to be a part of this too. So we have Varun here, he's from Delhi. We have Janvi here, she's from Baroda. And Manjari here, she's from Mumbai. And they all came with special strengths, architects wanting to do urban design related projects, special exhibition and retail designer who did not know how she would fit in, but she found a very important way to contribute. So yes, this is the story of a couple of Pokemons that got together with their powers and said, okay, we will start a firm called StudioPOD, which stands for People Oriented Design. And we were just normal people who like to play football and make movies and go out and take photographs and try to work out and be graphic designers and just normal people said, okay, let's not fool ourselves here and let's make an urban design and city planning firm. It was very important for us. Landscape architecture came in over the last year, more important projects like those. But when we said we will only focus mainly on planning and urban design, there are a lot of people who came to us and gave us the novel cliche. That's a very important part of our encounter. We had friends who came to us and said, how will you do urban planning projects in India? You guys all look too young. You're under 30, under 35, and you'll only and you will only be able to do like interiors. So start with that, get some revenue. So that's the first thing that comes to your question, right? Who will pay for this? And she said, okay, we will not do interiors of 3 BHKs. And there were senior people who told us, you will only do interiors, trust me. Join me, work with me, or do interiors, take a call. And we're like, it's okay, we'll fail, and we'll come back to you, because you'll hire us even there. But let us fail. So, and then of course, I was single then. Sarfraz and Mahesh had just had 2 babies who were 2-year-olds. And there were all these voices of these auntie-like figures or uncle-like figures who came to us and said, Shadi karo, start a firm where your husband is, you have kids, start talking about stable, money, and these are all things that all of us struggle with. So that no, it's okay. We kept that voice also to the side. Then of course there were our peers who said, there are architects who plan in India, join a big name and work for the next 7-8 years and slowly work your contacts up and stuff. And said there were other people who said that India mein koi planning nahi hota hai. There's no planning. Everything is chaotic. Look at me, I'm stuck in traffic. What will you do? What do you want to do? You're like, okay, fine. You also just be on the side for a while. And then of course there were those people who did chance pedants and came to us and said, I know a builder. Why don't you work for him for free? Do a couple of master plans, build up your portfolio, and eventually after you have something to show to the other clients, you will get a job. And a lot of people will come to you and be like, abhi tere paas koi, you have no experience, ye free mein kar, fir isko dikha logo ko and you will get one. So yes, we did struggle with all of this, and we still struggle with this. Even today, people come to us and like, oh, beta, aapka boss kaun hai? Ye hai. And we say, and I say, ye hai. So it was fun. So then after searching for a really long time and pitching to a lot of people, and we got one client who came to us and said, hey, I have 1,100 acres and I'm going to let you design. But you make sure you put in a golf course, you make sure you put in a housing, you make sure you put in plots, and don't give me gyan, just make sure it all fits in, give me a plot and let's start working. And we were very excited. We were like, okay, here is a guy, he's ready to pay us also. He has a lot of land also. And okay, he's come up with his own brief, but let's just put it in. And he asked us, when can you have this ready? And we were so excited, 3 of us were like, tomorrow. 6 options in a day. We will put all our knowledge and we have all these charrettes and work throughout the night and come up with these 6 options, and we will explain to you how all of them are different and how they fit in a golf course and everything else. And even though we were not convinced this is the right thing to do for this site, we're like, it's okay, this is what he wants, let's do it. It was a rookie mistake. Went ahead and we went back to him and he said, this is not working for me. Maybe this is too Western. You talk about American ideas and UK ideas and they don't really fit in India. We're like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, you are American educated. No idea how Indian planning works. I'm like, okay, fine. But we are Indians. So then we learned some lessons. We decided that you need to divide, we have to come up with a method that will say how we are putting our Indianness into this planning. And we did avoid, all 3 of us had a kind of an intervention, and said that, okay, we have this process that we have learned in academics through all the professors who have taught us. And even though they give you time to follow the process, you just can't discard it just because the client says, kal chahiye. So we said, okay, we will develop the process of this firm and we will see how, and no matter how much time it takes, we will follow a process. And of course, we decided to use innovative techniques to also talk to them, show them presentations, show them new ways of Prezi and all the new cool things, show them movies. Anyway, but the key was to be able to communicate to the person that you're talking to what is it that you're talking about. So, yes. And while we were doing this, we took a lot of inspiration and research. A lot of people who were talking about Western people who are talking about Indian ideas as well. They're going back to StudioPOD, which is basically, putting like we were squatting all the time, and then we put all these Western commodes in our kitchen. Kitchen.
That's why we don't do it here.
So yeah, that's why we don't do it here. So then put all these, and now they are going back with this product design. This won a lot of awards and stuff. The best product design in US and stuff. And we were like, yeah, It's like very Indian. Ramdev Baba has been telling us to do this all the times. And along with these other things that he's also been saying, that these are the things that we have been doing traditionally. Make sure you're healthy and make sure you do these asanas and all these things. So we started learning from all the cues and tricks that are happening around. And of course, this is a very relevant example. Create design that is Indian specific, right? Now in US you would probably develop maybe a robot or something to do this, but you have a lot of labor in India and you want to give them work. So how best can design make their life easier, right? So this is we love this example. So yeah, so then we did all this research and Mahesh, do you remember how Sarfraz sorry, Mahesh is sitting. Sarfraz, do you remember how we went back to him and what we told him?
Yeah, so the whole idea was to come back to our own mantras of city planning, right? This is the traditional understanding of Indian intelligence that we had. Why not use that to come up with our own mantras that would be very unique for us and would help us in sort of taking design decisions and further. So we came up with 6 mantras of our own. We said, let's invent stuff. So we said that, okay, we must respond contextually, we must enhance livability, connect efficiently, build intelligently, invest strategically, and collaborate actively. So in this presentation, we're going to go step by step in how we understood this, and we sort of used our traditional, our heritage, our history to understand how we used to do things and use it in a new, remodeled, refashioned, refurbished way in city planning. So the first example that I'm going to show you is about how we learned from a city called Jodhpur, or everyone knows Jodhpur, right? But we know that it's in the middle of a desert and it's the only water surplus city in that desert area. And how does it do it? So it's unique geography, and also there are these underground water channels that actually feed into these tanks and everything, all the life around Jodhpur is revolved around these tanks and these open spaces that they've created as part of their water strategy, right? So and on the other hand, we are in the middle of a big crisis. This is a NASA sort of map that is depicting the loss of groundwater table in the northern Himalayan basin. And the epicenter of it is the NCR region. It's losing water at 1 meter every year. So that's like a very, very difficult time that we are in. So we probably have like 30, 40 years left of water left over there. So it's sort of a pretty disturbing images that we come across with the water trains becoming a reality or every alternate year in drought-prone areas and everything. So we use this traditional understanding of what that is to design sort of 2 projects. We did 2 villages in Rajasthan. We had to do like a 25-year growth strategy for these 2 villages, and they're located on the Aravalli side of on the sort of eastern side of the Aravallis. Now, what happens with Rajasthan is interesting. It's sort of these very harsh winds that are blocked by the Aravalli ranges. Right? It's sort of whereas on the east side is pretty green. It's pretty actually sufficient in water and everything. And on the west side is the Great Indian Desert. That's Aravalli is the reason that the desertification has stopped at where it has stopped. So we use these 2 circles that you see are Savantri and Gadbor. They are 2 villages that we were sort of designing. So for the first step we started with was locate them where they are and then do this large sort of regional mapping of what the underground channels are or what are the flow channels that are very important to this region. And this is the town of the Gadbor, and you see that how intelligently sort of the village sits on the topmost side of the contour and it sort of drains on the other side, and all the drain channels are left the way it is, right? So our first growth strategy was to identify these and then come up with some land that can allow for growth in future. So the ones in red shows there are possibilities of growth in this direction. The ones in green are really going towards the hill. So we said we need to preserve those. Those are the real things that we must cherish, right? So and all the other channels were actually converted into these open spaces that would actually allow for the water to flow, allow for these underground water channels to sort of allow the rainwater to percolate in them. And then within that you sort of allocate land that would be used for different purposes. It would be very compact, walkable. So You identify these lands that would be infill, and that would be infill within the existing sort of villages, and the others that would be for the future development as the village grows. Now everything revolved around this 5-minute walking distance within the village. You don't want to encourage a different lifestyle. We've lived for thousands of years with this concept, and it sort of worked very well for us. So we've used that as a strength and said that we've designed a community that is based on these features and social hubs within 5 minutes walking distance, and came up with a plan that was derived from nature. It was derived from the geography. It was derived from a scientific process of how and where should the village expand to. This is an existing sort of situation. There's a temple in the middle, and that's the main driver of the economy in that area. And what we want to do is actually introduce new sort of connectivity to it, new lifestyles to it, but make sure the essence of the village remains Indian. It's sort of still very walkable. You have a new bus stand, you have new rickshaws and areas for all of those. We have new vending areas, we have new hotels that would come in because of the tourism potential. But still the essence of the village will be to make sure that there is enough water there is enough drainage, it is walkable. And similarly in Gadbor, we use the same areas to celebrate, the events that happen there. Because it's a temple town, there is an event every year which requires a lot of area, and it's sort of a fair that everyone comes to in this area. So that's one of the projects that we use as an example. Second sort of an extreme example is we use the story of the Carnatic basin. Now it's sort of, if you show on the South India side between the Eastern Ghats and the Bay of Bengal, this is an entire patch that has around 3 lakh ponds made. Now nobody knows who made these ponds, but it's quite interesting. The first of them were sort of found in around 200 BC or something. That was the first pond that was ever documented. And you see the ones in white over there, the blue over there are these series of different ponds that are there. If you go next, it will show you that it's quite an interesting feature, and all of these are man-made. So there is something that is going on. So we sort of, what's happening is over centuries, our villages, our sort of indigenous intelligence that we had made us think that, okay, this river is not a perennial river, but we have to make sure we collect whatever rainwater that we get. So what they do is, it's sort of an integrated pattern again, and these tanks are seriously sort of a series of cascading tanks. One overflows into the other, and all these water channels are extremely important for its functioning. But we know that there are these pressures of urbanization that India is in general going through, and we started sort of not respecting these, saying that, oh, एक conduit डाल देंगे हो जाएगा, एक culvert डाल देंगे हो जाएगा. We started building sort of on these plains, and that has resulted in a lot of devastation because the flow patterns have been disturbed, the water flow on land has been disturbed, and Chennai floods is the result of one of the unchecked development patterns that we have in the area. There was a loss of 25,000 crores of property. There were like 500 deaths, 18 lakh people got displaced. Huge implications of bad planning that we can have on development. So we took this same thing, and we sort of had the opportunity to work in Bhubaneswar. It has a similar problem of flooding. What happens is during monsoons, lately there have been a lot of development that is actually being flooded. So we had to study how Bhubaneswar also was growing. So initially it was built on a higher sort of contour. The Mahanadi river was sort of right next to it. It was allowed to flood over a period of time. But then again, the pressure of urbanization was sort of pushing all these sort of the dense center into other areas that was flood prone. And we've seen that over and over again, that when Mahanadi floods, there were other developments that were in the way that actually were getting flooded, and there was a loss of property and lives because of that. And all the data was sort of collected from, data is very, very difficult in India to get. So all of this was open source data that is available to us, and it's not accurate, but it still gives you a fairly good idea of what to look for. So the site was shown in red, and we took inspiration from the Carnatic basin, and we said that, okay, if this is the site, we will connect it with the main city with high-speed sort of transportation corridors, and how do we build on it? So the next was to make sure that we design a master plan that would allow its open space to become these tanks when it floods. When it rains, it pours, right? So you want to collect all the water that is there at that point of time and make sure it doesn't feed into the already flooded area. So you're doing your part of collecting these water, storing it for some time, and when the storm event recedes, you sort of let these water sort of flow out casually, easily sort of into the system so that you don't overwhelm the entire landscape. And that's the master plan. It was an invited competition. We won this competition. It was before Bhubaneswar was selected to be the next smart city. But this was sort of the thought process that we collaborated with a firm called IBI Group. And all these projects that we've done are in collaboration with people. That's why one of our main ideas is we must collaborate actively, because that's where all the positive ideas come from, when we sort of work with different people together, right? The next sort of principle that I'm going to talk about is enhanced livability. It's sort of an abstract term, but we need to understand how urban planning can have an impact on yours and my life as well, right? So India is sort of facing another crisis. We're going to be the diabetic capital. We are already the diabetic capital of the world, and it's increasing at an alarming rate, right? And 60% of the deaths are avoidable, and it's because of the lifestyle that you and me chose. It's because we're designing cities that are actually promoting or not promoting walking or exercising, and we have our sweets as well, right? And we have our food that is extremely sort of oily. We could sustain that because we used to work in the farms and sort of work it out. But at the same time, cities are becoming unsafe. This year, it was reported that there were 1.5 lakh people that died on the roads, and that's a pretty big number, right? That's like, maybe it is like 30 World Trade Centers that crashed. It's like in a year we have that kind of a calamity that happens on our streets. They're not safe for us to walk, they're not safe for us to drive. But these are all things that are happening in the background. We need to be cognizant of these. And one of the easiest solutions that we could do is build walkable cities. Now WHO predicts that if we do and build walkable cities, we could avoid around half of the deaths that are happening right now because of our lifestyle and the way our cities are designed. And we could save around $15 billion. And that means that in 10 years, we can have around 98,000 crores of funds that would be available to us. We lose those funds because most of our people are sick. Well, the ones that are dying are sick, and we're spending too much money on their treatment. That means that we can have 2 Amrut schemes every alternate year. Like, imagine that kind of money that we can save. The opportunity cost of how many lives lost and how much they could contribute to the development of our country. Something that we used to be so good at, designing compact, walkable neighborhoods, have somewhere fizzled out into the whole thing. But one of the things that we did do is we did diversify. So we used our connections in the US, and we worked with a firm in Boston called CBT Architects to do a master plan in Masdar City in Abu Dhabi. It's known to be sort of pretty famous because Norman Foster did a master plan for this city, and the entire city is divided into 4 phases, 5 phases, and we were doing phase 2 of it. It's 280 acre of master plan. Norman Foster started with the leftmost plan. His idea was sort of utopian. We'll put a car underneath, we'll build a massive podium on top, everyone will walk on the top, and then but what 2008 happened in Abu Dhabi. Even Abu Dhabi couldn't afford to build cities that way. So then they revised the master plan to become more regular, where cars and buses and the buildings were on the same plane as well at the same time. But it was a terrible, terrible plan. And then sort of a detailed master plan was done in 2015 that we revised in changing one portion of that plan. Go next. Essentially what we started with was that you have to understand how to read a city, right? So probably you all know that as many intersections that a neighborhood or a city has, it's actually better. It's an opportunity that you create at every intersection. You meet people. There's opportunity for retail. There's opportunity for all sorts of things that can happen. So that's one of the ways that people have used to read cities. Venice has 580 intersections per square kilometer, and you can see that Irvine, or in US, it's suburbia, has like only 6 intersections. So that many less opportunities for people to meet, that many less opportunities to create a better place, right? Whereas Masdar was sort of somewhere in between, was at 18 kilometers, 18 intersections per square kilometer when we got the project. Our step we took was, there are massive blocks with less streets. What we did was we first divided the large blocks into smaller blocks. We created smaller developable plots that anyone, any small developer can come and sort of build on top of it, and then came up with a massive sort of plan in which it was about the pedestrian movement, the human comfort within that area, and that became the unit that we used to actually design the 280 acres. On top of that, you sort of program it in such a way that your daily needs are sort of taken care of. You don't have to use your car to go to, to go for your yoga classes, go for your morning coffee. You can actually just walk within this entire area, and it was programmed in that way. That was the overall sort of thing that we achieved. And in last year, it won the best AIA Urban Design Award. It was sort of a big deal for us because the things that we were talking over here did not sort of ring a bell with a lot of people here, but it did make a lot of sense for other places. And it's about human comfort at the end of the day, right? It was so successful that recently we got invited to bid for a massive island by the Urban Planning Council that was judging this project. And we are up against Remkulas, AECOM, and all the top 8, 10 sort of top companies in the SOM, HOK, Hawkinsville, yeah. So, but it's cool. It's sort of a testament to the walkability and livability aspect of this plan, and it really shows that a good design that is people oriented can actually work in different environments. You just have to make sure you adapt it and to its context.
But Sarfraz, if you look at the whole kind of master plan itself, the experience which we did is in a totally different context. It started off with India as a major kind of concentration for planning and urban design, and looking at the overall approach which we had with people over here when we were working. Everybody was like, this is Abu Dhabi, this is UAE, it won't work over here. The point being that obviously every place is different, its context is different. UAE has an entire institutional framework set up, infrastructure framework set up that they could adhere to and implement such scale projects. The point with India is, again, as some of the examples we showed in the beginning, we have been doing great planning in our past historically, but somewhere down the line we have lost that intelligence which we had. We need to go back and kind of revive that pattern of building intelligent cities itself. This is Dholavira in like 4,000 years back. Planned city. It had everything in its place: water reservoirs, underground drains, water ducts that would carry the water. Again, it's something similar to what Sarfraz explained in Jodhpur, kind of a water drought area. This is a step well in Gujarat. All these things were amazing architecture, amazing planning pieces which we did like centuries back. And now if you see, we are kind of back towards it. All our infrastructure, the open drains, sewage inside it, it's somewhat appalling in a way that we are not really connecting, or where's the lost pattern gone? This is a project which we were doing again in Gurgaon. One of the first projects which we did in Gurgaon was this 1,000-acre plan which we were talking about. It was located in a place where we were studying the entire kind of the geography of the place. Went back to again open source data on Google Earth. Just looked at some of the things which were happening over the past like 10-15 years. We noticed that there was an STP. Again, this is an infrastructure bit, but it's very important to notice the trend, how land kind of responds to when infrastructure pieces are developed. An STP was built like in 2006, and there was a canal which was drawn towards another drain north of the city in Gurgaon. And what happened over the years was it started kind of with that drain, the land around started getting more ground table, which was again the thing which we talked about in the very beginning about losing groundwater table. This was something which happened with an infrastructure project next to it. So the point being, what we started looking at it was why don't we look at infrastructure which is not like we take the entire STP, sewage treatment plant, like 2 or 3 in a big city, right? So instead of doing that, what we did was we gave a strategy for the city of Gurgaon, where we decentralized the STP and having a much more localized way of looking at it. So at every neighborhood has kind of, these are 2 places where the whole city of Gurgaon has the current STP is located. What we did was almost every sector and neighborhood had their own STP system, which could be easily developed, and a much more kind of easier management system could be, wastewater management system could be established. So looking at a scale of the 1,000-acre again, looking at the development and open space, how it would respond to each other, we kind of created a system where the open spaces were planned in such a way that the STP could really drain out these things and use the irrigation for the landscape itself. Kind of a symbiotic relationship between the built form and the landscape itself. And that really kind of struck a chord with the government as well as the developer who we were working with. It's really about trying to create infrastructure in a very intelligent manner so that it's responding to the context around it. Same thing with the rainwater capture, kind of really going into detail of making sure the open spaces kind of again irrigated in a very natural fashion, so that the rainwater which is there, it's stored in the buildings, is reused over there itself, and also for the irrigation of the open spaces. Another system which we kind of looked at, this is a very kind of important strategy, solid waste management in cities. We know that there are dumping grounds everywhere. We know the story of Deonar, what happened lately. The point is that we have to kind of relook at kind of localizing the whole system itself. Talking about reuse, talking about recycling, talking about making sure that whatever the wet waste comes out of it, the kitchens on daily basis, we actually use them and make kind of biogas plants and all those things. So kind of an ecosystem is developed within the built form and the open spaces itself. So this was something which really at that point, I think it was Amir Khan's show, right, that came through. And he talked about this whole solid waste management, and it was a big hit. And we had a presentation the next day when the minister was there. Oh, Amir Khan's show talked about it, so we should definitely do it now. We, again, coming back to a localized fashion of doing things, we have been doing a lot of these things way back, and it's kind of in the whole system of kind of administration of cities, we have lost that. Same thing with energy, about trying to have renewable energy as much as possible. And this was again done 3 years back. We've got more kind of collaborations working with some of the best in the world. We have collaborated with Smart Energy, who are working in the US. So a lot of the systems can be really easily replicated in a way that is much more contextual for our cities. So the next point which we want to discuss is connect efficiently as such. So this is an image of Chandni Chowk in Delhi. If you look at what we've tried to do over here is, it's an old 18th century, 19th century photo where there are like Hathi Ghoda Palki, all kind of users there, right? And if you really relate them to the current kind of users which you would have in our cities and our streets, they will have like cars, we'll have people walking, we'll have auto rickshaws, electric rickshaws, everything. So if you compare that and see right now the way we are planning our city, this is Gurgaon in its like peak hour time. Vehicle congestion is like tripling almost every year in this part, and in general in India, because the way our development is going, our prosperity is indirectly kind of compared to a scooter wala has an aspiration of getting a car. A car will have, the next aspiration will be to get an Audi or an SUV. And the amount of population we have, just imagine, we cannot afford that kind of lifestyle. The kind of infrastructure we need to build to accommodate all of those, it's like if you imagine the whole anatomy to our body itself, the veins, when the blood flows through the veins, the wider the veins become, more and more blood keeps on flowing, right? Same thing with the cars. The more and more cars will put on the roads, your infrastructure plan will never be enough, because we just don't have the numbers to match the planned infrastructure with. So the bottom line being that we have to think differently in a way that it's not vehicles we are transferring from one point to the other in cities or places. It's the people whom we are trying to transfer, right? It's the attitude towards a car-centric approach is changed to a people-centric approach. Again, going back to some of the work which we did a whole master plan for 6,000 acres of open spaces in Gurgaon. And as part of that, we revisited all the streets. And what we did with them was like, she was already the CRCI, Gurmeet Kaur, she was already a conservation architect who was an anchor person along with the city, Jagannath Puri. So what we did, we looked at the entire city of Puri, specifically with this, the Badadanda road, where it's a very kind of varied kind of thing. The street normally is a very wide street. On the top left is an image of day-to-day activities happening over there. But during every year for Rath Yatra, on every 8 to 12 to 16 years, there is an event called Navakalebar, where you have the idols are basically changed. And there are millions of people who visit this place. And you see the amount of people on that street, it's amazing. And it's a totally different experience altogether. The entire place is very religious. So we kind of compared the program of these events which happened as compared to a day-to-day lives. And you see this kind of a very chaotic like any other street, but being such wide, so very kind of non-human scale. And the Rath Yatra has to accommodate the entire street itself in its totality. So going forward, what we did was we looked at, obviously it was about mobility, what to do with this wide street in a normal day-to-day life. So we had to look at it in a larger picture of the street being a part of the larger system of the city itself. And different programs which happen, zoning of it and everything, we looked at it in a more detail. And really making that as a driver of making the street a great public street itself. And if you go next, we kind of had a very city level mobility strategy. We have a whole document over here which talks more in detail. But the driving factor of what we're trying to do over here was having alternate ways of commuting within the city through the street, giving options for public transit, giving ways of kind of parking strategies outside so that people can walk easily on the street over there, and really looking at it in a much larger scale, and then coming down to the design for the street. And the proposed urban design intervention which we had was like obviously the new public transit strategy, creating a very good landscape and signage strategy on the street, which is there throughout the year so that people know where they have to be there on the street itself. We had a very large level zoning, like a mobility zone for the cars, an activity zone which was more of these kiosks and anything which were happening there, public zone which is a sidewalk, and the active edge zone is essentially the built form edge itself. So, and we did a whole street design toolkit looking at different examples, and it's a very unique way of looking at it, that it is a wide right of way, but you have to think of all the people using that street itself. And it was again very well appreciated by the government itself, and right now it's in a stage of kind of trying to look at specific projects that could be taken out of these as DPRs, like detailed project reports. Yeah, this entire toolkit is available online free on the Hridaya website of the Government of India. And also, this is a cool kind of, again, looking back, talking about collaboration. Manjari, she's not an architect, she was part of this team with us, and she was the retail and exhibition specialist in our team, and she wanted to work on this project with us, and not being an architect, not being from the exact field or planning field which we were from, she contributed in a much different way. That wayfinding is an important factor, right? When you design, even at the cityscape level, you have to know how things are operated. And this is really totally, this is very much needed in almost all cities in India. And in terms of how you look at it is very important of how you maneuver around the city. Apps could be easily generated if you have a nice wayfinding strategy. Maps could be done online. It's like a totally dynamic way of looking at places. And in today's day and age, you can have a very kind of easily communicating kind of a tool with apps and all as well. The next principle, just to quickly summarize, invest strategically. We looked at, again, Mumbai, right, being the city we are in. The rails were like 1853, the first train set, and Churchgate Station in 1928 had that much expanse of a public infrastructure that could really accommodate people at that time. Not saying it still does the same, it still is overflowing, but the point is, it still has the capacity to grow in and out, right? And people are still using it. We do need more infrastructure pieces in the city. But the point is public infrastructure, if invested in the right fashion and in the right places, do look at a much larger kind of return over time. So two things which we were looking at was creating land value with public amenities and infrastructure, like really pushing investment opportunities as places where public could kind of gather in these amenity places, really tapping into transportation infrastructure over time that could be increasing the land value around these station areas. Next. So this concept of TOD, transit-oriented development, again, we've been talking about it a lot these days in Mumbai specific with the TP, which was released last year, got scrapped with a, I don't want to go into details of why and how, but a very good concept which was being talked about was TOD. People said, shot down, we have attended conferences, meetings, they were like great architects, planners in the city have opposed to that idea being a westernized concept. We in Mumbai have actually grown with the whole notion of transit. The entire lifeline of the city has been revolving around the railway line itself. From the station towards your house where you travel, you have all your amenities around it. So the concept is such that it's just basically capturing the land value around the station areas. And this is something which with urban regeneration has been done throughout all over. It's not only about developed or developing. Everywhere around the world, people are taking up this and using this as a tool of really making sure your transit, your land use, and densities are speaking to each other. So this is a project which we're working in Allahabad as part of the USTDA Smart Cities project which we worked in, and we really kind of try to drive this factor into the proposal that you have to think about transit and land use together when you talk about densities. And this was something very important, and it could be done in any. It's not like Mumbai doesn't have space. We have everything as a real kind of compact city up to a certain point, but we have to kind of leverage it and not kind of look at outer options right away. Yeah. This is another again same the BRT concept in the bus rapid transit in Allahabad, which we were proposing, and really looking at the street environment. Yeah. Which can be kind of captured in a much better and walkable street environment itself. Next. The second thing was open spaces. So this again the 1,000-acre project. So really looking at open space as the kind of the walkable distance from the open spaces can really capture the value of land around it and incentivize those to become a much greater built form itself. So this is the plan which we finished at the end for the 1,000-acre. We made sure that the entire open space, again, we are not showing all the layers of this, but going back to the eco-sensitive planning and going back to open spaces being in the right places. Also making sure that the development around it is capturing that essence, and people are giving access to the right amount of development, to the right amount of amenities and open spaces. So our hubs also, if you see the densities automatically are more kind of focused around the open spaces and transit areas next to it. And again, this is a slide from our Ajmer proposal for the smart cities, where we are trying to show where open spaces when there's a very big Annasagar lake in Ajmer. So we're talking about how open space, density and transportation can come together. We talked about all the ideas of equitable streets, the ideas about decentralized STPs, smart lighting, all of that. And at the end of it, when we talk about profitability, all these infrastructure investments which we did, specifically the Gurgaon project when we worked on, those guys only understood numbers as developers. So when we said that in right infrastructure investments done in the right way can give you the amount of profitability, they were zapped when they saw this entire graph. It's essentially when more density you're going, more and more kind of profitability you have, but there's a kind of sweet spot where it dips down. So they actually agreed where they were talking about doing an entire development of plotted housing, of just kind of suburban kind of a development. We got the ideas of the right kind of open spaces, amenities, transportation, and gave them the right density numbers, which actually worked much more profitable for them. And they, even though they had they could have gone for lower density and straightforward sell the plots and development, they opted for a much more kind of a holistic way of looking at it. And it's not all about, when you talk about investing strategically, it's not about finance in terms of just earning more money. It's all about giving opportunities to all kinds of instead of people, giving community as well as economic benefits to the community. And the kind amount of jobs that could be created would be much higher than we would normally see if in any other normal master plan. We had much kind of a detailed analysis done in the open space document which we created for 6,000 acres in Gurgaon, and it literally kind of showed them the possibilities that could be created the right amount of planning of good infrastructure itself. And the point being, this was all good when we were looking at it, but when we thought that planning as a top-down approach is always something which is a one-way dialogue, and none of these things are possible unless people talk to each other, not only in terms of citizens, but organizations, institutions like these. We have to collaborate actively in the search of the whole planning exercise itself.
If somebody asks you, what is your experience, what have you done, we show them a book. They're like, okay, this is what we've done, this is the toolkit of Puri that we've sort of created, and you have to make sure that you make things in such a way that they're compelled to sort of open it, they look at it and say that, wow, this looks very impressive, this looks like $1 million job. You're like, yeah, we got paid really not that much. We did this. For every question that was raised for our qualification, we produced a book. For Gurgaon, and he said that, okay, what would you do with the 1,000 acres? He said, this is a plan that we did for 1,000 acres of master planning that we can do within that. And he said, okay, what have you done in other than in open space? So we made an entire toolkit for the city of Gurgaon, saying that, okay, 6,500 acres in 4 months. Yes, we've designed some sort of toolkit and an idea how to go about doing things in cities. And then you sort of say, okay, what happened? I've done villages before. Yeah, we've sort of done 2 villages and compiled it in a way that we can sort of this we found what is no, we've done just 2,000 acres of master planning. It's an award-winning project, but we've not done much. This we found as a very, very effective technique of convincing people, of communicating your ideas, of convincing them that this group has the capability, they can deliver on time. So that's been sort of our mantra, that if you've been bombarded with these questions, you sort of pick another book, or make sure you have another book to show off. And we tried really hard to sort of compile our points. So that's a StudioPOD brochure that we compiled recently. So yeah.
I wanted to ask you the water project which you did in Bhubaneswar. There, the data which you were constantly showing, did you actually went there and tracked that entire area, or did it digitally?
There's a website that does that. So you have to be very smart about all these things. The data is very, very difficult to get in India. So with Allahabad Ajmer, we've done these offices that we went to day in and day out and sort of asked for data. Give us GIS, give us this. They didn't know they had GIS. It was sitting in a locker in a CD somewhere. So we made them take that CD out, give it to us, and we were like, why aren't you using the CAD file? Like, no one knows how we use GIS over here. So like, okay, fine, give us the GIS. So you have to be really smart about these things. There's a website, with Bhubaneswar we were lucky, there's a website that shows sea level rise in coming future. It actually documents how the sea level is going to rise, and that actually shows you flooding prone areas in that area. So with Bhubaneswar we took that data that is available to us.
And also one of the things with Bhubaneswar was we were ultimately it was going to be presented to the Bhubaneswar authority, and they did not give us any data. This was a competition pitch. So when IBI had the interaction with them, they said, yeah, that's true. We don't have the exact data, but what you're saying is true in principle. And if you do see the elevation of the site that we had identified from ground level was different from what we had said. So they were like, okay, this is a good theory. So, and even in Puri, a lot of them were studies that we did from online, and we went to Puri, got a lot of data. And ultimately, when you get into DPRs and specific projects, that's when you recommend these detailed studies. Otherwise, you will be like struggling for 6 months, just there, going on site. So it's like a give and take. But on the other hand, if we do get a project that is a detailed master plan that is actually to get it, we will request geotechnical data, all these different things that will become the next part. So I hope that answers.
I wanted to just understand like what exactly like you mean by Indianness, and like in two of those village projects, the planning that you've done. So like further development if happens, then do you think that Indianness that you have used to come up with this scheme or this plan will be retained in that core village, or will it start losing that Indianness? So does your idea talks about only responding to these Indianness that you have defined and come up with plans, or to retain it also in future?
So the projects which we showed you right now are mostly like planning projects, and some of the things which we wanted to kind of look back into our own past, our own Indian history and way of doing things. We tried to kind of capture it at a planning scale, which we have not been able to show in this presentation. Is we have worked on like real like urban design projects. We're doing a 30-acre school master plan in Raipur, another 10-acre in Karnala. So the point is, when you do look at it at such a big scale, you have to kind of really look at the logistics of how things are working at a fine grain as well. So it's very important to kind of think at different scales when you're looking at these things. So the Indianness which we try to capture in some of the projects, we have done kind of a detailed guidelines thing as well for Puri and everything. And if you look at some of these things, we always try to kind of capture back some of the historical data, or some of the way of understanding typologies, let's say, as an example. So some of these things have to kind of translate at different scales, and you can talk about it at a conceptual level, but as Mansi said, when you actually look at the next stage of a detailed project report or the guidelines, how you would implement a planning scale project, you have to kind of demonstrate those as well. So some of those we have tried. I think it's for all of us a learning experience, that we've tried to capture some of these at a smaller scale projects as well, and it's something which we are evolving around time.
And also one of the things, especially for the infill sort of projects, one of our main motive has been to also stop a lot of obvious things that are going to happen in the next. So maybe it doesn't fall in the Indianness, but the whole point that they were widening a lot of roads in the city, in the village, randomly, just because nobody has, and in Puri, just the first thing that comes to everybody's mind is like, ye tank hatao, udhar ek road banao. So when this Puri, and we were working with a heritage conservation architect and a firm called KRVIA, they had done a lot of groundwork and a lot of base data, and a lot of things came from them and said these are core areas that need to be preserved. So you plan a road around it so that there is access to it and you never feel that it's not accessible, and then let's upgrade the streets on ground so that it's walkable. There can be a mini van in case there's an emergency to go in. And the way the people live their life here is very different. There are 30 families, all dedicated to the temple. Every day, everything revolves around the temple. They have their entire lifestyle revolves around it. Now, the new areas that we identified, that's what we had showed, while we were identifying the buildable land, because we were giving this to the Devasthan department, we identified a lot of non-buildable lands. And we said, let's save these from never getting developed. And we requested a land use change. We said, even 60 years from now, if you put in, say, non-developable or naturally in the nature zone, then it cannot be developed. That was our, whatever we could do at this high level is like, okay, let's identify parcels in the future, let them develop it. Maybe they'll follow a grid or, a wider street, but at least they'll build in the right place. So it's like a step, and we're not going anywhere. The minute everything happens, 30 years, we'll be back, we'll be like, okay, let's do the next thing. So, sometimes it's also about stopping some damage to it, then just always.
No, and I agree. I think the era when a single architect or a planner used to design cities is gone. It's not there anymore. We are one of the players within a large group of people who are going to build this village, right? One of them is a conservation architect. The other is going to be a streetscape specialist. The third one is going to be an infrastructure specialist. There's going to be so many people who need to understand what Indianness is. And our role as urban planners, we've sort of interpreted our role as urban planners, as urban designers, in bringing about as much Indianness as we can. And everyone, that's the role of an Avenger. We are looking for Avengers in every aspect of city building who will come up with the same idea that we need to make a better place. Right?
And they're going to the villages, giving presentations in Hindi and in Marwari to explain to them, because ultimately it's going to be their city. So it's also a long-term engaging process, right? Once you put in the thing, you constantly tell them, and somewhere, maybe 30 years from now, some kid will be like, hey, don't widen the street. It's my street. I walk here, I play here. That's the ultimate goal, but it will take time to reach there.
I'm Varun. You gave certain examples of old cities where you took certain ideas from the old cities which were developed in that time and that context, and then you made them relevant in today's context. So my question was that these kind of things evolve in a very incremental way, like the way Christopher Alexander says that there are certain patterns which emerge very naturally, and that's how these areas evolve. While when generally planners take up these ideas, we design the entire plan together. That's how a lot of people do it. I have seen a few examples where this incremental idea is allowed to evolve by setting certain parameters which allow a certain things to evolve a certain way but do not restrict the incremental pattern. So have you ever discovered something like this or tried to use something like this?
That's the toolkit right there. So the toolkit, we can't plan the city of Jagannath Puri. Trust me, we got 1.5 months for it. So you cannot plan. But what the toolkit says is what is it that you should do and what are the good things, and we gave examples of practices that are doing it globally. We tried to save the river, we tried to save the kunds, and we showed them how you can develop new things around the kunds
In an
incremental manner. Now, tomorrow someone might come and say, "Mujhe zyada FSI chahiye," or whatever, and that is okay, as long as the river is not blocked. So there are these certain, you have to choose your battles, and everything is a start. So this then becomes a start for maybe 100 DPRs that are going to come in Pune. But everybody will get a page and say, okay, if you're near the river, this is what you follow. You do not cross this line. You do not put concrete there either. You cannot make, you cannot fancy, you cannot make a concrete edge because the Puri toolkit says so. The toolkit is saying there's a natural edge. The river is a perennial river, needs to come up, needs to go down. Do not make it into a canal, ever. So, those are the kind of things we've chosen our battles. We've kind of given those parameters that will guide any designer, any architect or planner that comes.
I think one of the key points what you're saying is very critical is flexibility built into planning and urban design, right? One of my professors in Berkeley always used to say this amazing statement, like urban design is not something for the current generation to come everything is perfectly done for them. It's how you kind of create that flexibility so that when you go, the next one who comes can make it better, right? So it's not, you are not going to be there throughout to look at the whole thing. It's a 25-year vision plan, I don't know where I'm going to be in the next 5 years. So it's very important to build in those kind of flexibility components into the master plan, that it has to evolve, respond to the time, age, kind of involvement in technology, what is happening. So you have to respond to all those parameters. One of the things which we were doing in the Mazdar project also was the key factor where we tried to build in kind of flexibility for developers who, right now there was a demand for like smaller developers to come in. They wanted like a very specific developable parcels that could be built in. But we did not start off with the argument that we have to develop smaller parcels. We started off with the whole notion that we need to create an amazing public transit framework which could respond to a current demand of a small plot right now, But if let's say next 5 years down the line a bigger developer wants to combine those plots, that public realm still remains. The plots, you can do whatever you can combine with the public realm, which is the core essence of walkability, all the things which we are trying to achieve. Those should not change. Some of it is again something which we have tried to kind of touch base. It's evolving as we.
And we're learning every day.
Guys, I had a question when you were talking about the profit evaluations of your master plans. There's a very interesting point that you mentioned that the master plan should prioritize communities with certain economic benefits, right? That's how you're predicting the future growth for that particular community. So I don't know if I'm right, but I'm assuming that these that would be like design set aside, that would be like a programmatic proposal, right? So, but now that itself calls for a completely new imagination of the program for that existing community, given the economic conditions, given the existing political conditions. How do you propose a master plan that would prioritize, or that would give that space and time for citizens to have those economic benefits? Like, how do you imagine that?
So, like Mahesh said, it's sort of an interesting idea. But, well, I personally sort of took a lot of training when I did my masters in urban design. It took a lot of training to not look at the end as urban designers and planners. You're not visualizing the end, but you're visualizing the process and what are the key sort of. We cannot compromise on these things. Other than that, everything else will evolve. For instance, in Mumbai, the DP from 91 has from 50s, 60s, it has evolved and it has become 91, and we're still trying to evolve the same DP that had the same plots, that had the same reservation, but it has turned out to be completely different from every decade to decade. But apparently, Mumbai is the only development plan that actually differentiates between a hospital and a school and a this and a that, and it is very important to know that. And imagine cities all across India don't have that. Everything is commercial. So what has happened is everything, all the other land users were not specified to be this or that, but it's up to us as urban planners, urban designers to actually identify this is what I vision, this is the vision that it's going to be for the next 30 years, and it has this amount of flexibility and give of where I want to be. Maybe I wanted to shoot for this, but I achieved this much, but it's still a process. Cities are a work in process, so it will achieve that. So you have to set the bar really high and achieve somewhere close by, and it's not a final vision that you're actually going to achieve. So I hope that does that at all answer the question.
I don't know if this will help, but this is just an example. So one thing when we were working on the Gurgaon master plan specifically was that we did this whole study of how sports can actually help the economy of India, and the whole idea of being a sports area being available to a normal person empowers them to play sports and stuff, right? And that will give you national level players, and ultimately you will perform well in the Olympics, and if that happens, you get a lot of more people who will brand you and who will give you money. And it's one thing that relates to economy. But in planning, what does that mean? It means you make not these gated communities for which there are these smaller, clubhouses which has a teeny-weeny court, and you combine them. And what we were trying to make these social hubs was give them world standard sports facilities, give them world standard libraries, and share it with a bigger group, so that every kid, no matter, even if it's your maid's kid or whatever, can ultimately take membership. That will be not like a Bombay Gymkhana where it's very elite and you need to be belonging, you need to have your forefathers here or whatever. You can use your Aadhaar card, go in, play a game, pay 50 rupees and come back or whatever else. But it gives you the accessibility, and hopefully that will create more athletes, and hopefully that will help the economy. This one idea that we were trying to sell and did ultimately get bought. So similarly to that, there are different things. You get farmers in, you let them get money directly, and that will help them eventually. Get the middleman out. You create an open space, you create enough programs to give enough people jobs. and that itself will help you increase your per capita income as a group in general, and maybe have startups. So hopefully that so those are things that you have to get it down to. Okay, what can I do at a physical level? At a
That's right. I just wanted to understand how do you promise that value and how do you create it. I just wanted to understand.
This was really a 3-year plan.
Yeah.
So the project, the projections we saw was about if you plan for so much density, you will achieve this. If you plan for so much, you will achieve this. But if the density went beyond a point, it will actually cost you more and won't be as effective. So we also said that don't just completely build it out.
Don't make a parade.
There's a sweet spot in somewhere in the middle, and that's the scenario that you need to lay out in front of everyone, saying that you can make a very, very profitable project, but it's really not worth it. In the long run, this will help you more. So because it was a government agency, they understood. Maybe the developer would have taken a different scenario and gone ahead in a different manner.
And portions of it, they have a target of 5 years for each phase. So at least half of the phase 2 retail master which you are showing would be actually developed the way we have planned in the guidelines. So that's the scale of operation as well. The city plan, obviously, strategic plan will take much longer, but when you're operating in retail master plans, depending on the plan, depending on everything, it takes of work.
So for Puri, they are in the process of making DPRs. So this was, our role was just to give the bigger role of the Hriday champion for that city, which we collaborated with KRVIA. They are now working on detailed DPRs that are going to be released, which are going to be specific for heritage zones, and that is going to come up as next. So right now we saw on the Hriday website it's 8% of DPRs have been planned, but the toolkit has been approved. It is on their website. That's what we were saying. It's available online on the Hriday website. It has been approved as the plan for Puri city in general, or the guidelines. And DPRs will be coming out of
feasibility studies for each.
feasibility. So each one will then go in a more detailed study. So for the river, the feasibility study will come in. They will talk to people. They will do their whole planning process for smaller things. So that's where the bigger ones are. For the Devasthan department, that is the 2 villages. That is also under approval. They are showing it to the Chief Minister now of Rajasthan and trying to get approval. We want 2 schools that is starting construction hopefully soon. Where we're doing
There is a 10-acre Karnataka.
we did a very small 10-acre project in Karnataka, which was through a CSR initiative, and there it was a Dosti group. So they have given us tiles and all and said, let's just refurbish some of the buildings and make the pavings and stuff. But the plan was a vision that they are going to keep to get more people to give them money. So that's different stages everywhere.